There's a place in Jamaica where the Caribbean Sea meets forgotten history. A town that once blazed with innovation, then faded into obscurity. But something extraordinary is happening there right now. Jamaica is building a third city, and the location they've chosen isn't Kingston. It isn't Montego Bay. It's a coastal town that most of the world has never heard of, yet it holds the key to reshaping an entire nation's future. This is the story of Black River, and what's about to happen here could change the Caribbean forever. If you want to see how this unfolds, hit that subscribe button right now. Help us reach 5,000 subscribers and stay ahead of the stories that matter. Let's start with a question that seems simple but isn't. Why would any country build a brand new city from nothing? The answer reveals everything about where Jamaica stands today and where it's desperately trying to go. Kingston, Jamaica's capital, is drowning. Not in water, but in people, cars, and decades of infrastructure that was never designed for this many souls trying to survive in one place. Over 600,000 people packed into an urban sprawl where traffic doesn't just slow down, it stops. Where housing prices have climbed so high that young professionals are forced to choose between crushing debt or living with family well into their 30s. The public transportation system, patched together over generations, creaks under demand it was never built to handle. Then there's Montego Bay, paradise for tourists, pressure cooker for residents. The second city has become so focused on serving international visitors that locals often feel like extras in their own hometown. Hotels rise while affordable housing falls behind. The wealth flows in, but it doesn't always flow down. And the infrastructure, much like Kingston's, is perpetually playing catch-up with a population that keeps growing and an economy that keeps demanding more. This is the reality driving Jamaica's bold decision. Two cities can't carry the weight of 3 million people's dreams. The island needs a release valve, a third option, a place where the mistakes of the past don't have to be repeated because everything starts fresh. But here's where it gets interesting. Jamaica didn't choose just anywhere. They chose a place with a story, a place that was once magnificent and has been waiting for a second act. Black River sits on Jamaica's south coast in the parish of St. Elizabeth. Today, if you drive through, you'll see a quiet fishing town, colonial buildings with peeling paint, narrow streets where the pace of life moves like the river itself, slow and steady. It's the kind of place that travelers pass through on their way to somewhere else, barely noticing what they're missing. But rewind 2 centuries, and Black River was one of the most important ports in the entire Caribbean. Ships arrived from Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Goods flowed through its docks. Wealth accumulated in the hands of merchants and traders. And here's the detail that makes you stop and think. Black River was one of the first places in the entire Western Hemisphere to have electric street lights. That's before most American cities, before countless European towns. This small Jamaican port was illuminated by innovation, while much of the world still relied on gas lamps and candles. The same goes for automobiles. Black River saw cars driving through its streets at a time when horses still dominated transportation across the globe. This wasn't some backwater. This was a place on the cutting edge, a place that embraced the future faster than almost anywhere else. Then something happened that happens to many places that rise too fast. Economic shifts, the decline of certain trade routes, and the gravitational pull of Kingston and Montego Bay drained Black River of its prominence. The lights that once symbolized progress dimmed. The port that once bustled grew quiet. For generations, Black River became a footnote in Jamaica's story, remembered by historians but overlooked by planners. Until now, Jamaica's government has announced that Black River will become the island's third city. Not just an expanded town, not just a development project. A full city with the infrastructure, institutions, and economic engines to stand alongside Kingston and Montego Bay. The goal is to create a hub that can absorb population growth, attract investment, generate employment, and distribute Jamaica's prosperity beyond the two urban centers that have monopolized it for so long. If this works, the impact could be staggering. Imagine tens of thousands of jobs created not over decades but within years. Construction workers building the foundations, engineers designing the systems, teachers filling new schools, doctors staffing modern hospitals, technology professionals launching startups in innovation districts, logistics experts managing expanded port operations. The employment cascade could reach into nearly every sector of Jamaica's economy. But employment is just the beginning. Consider education. Right now, Jamaica's top universities and research institutions cluster in Kingston. Students from rural parishes often face a cruel choice: leave home for education or stay and limit your opportunities. A third city built with education as a pillar changes that equation. Imagine university campuses rising in Black River, research centers focused on Caribbean challenges, technical institutes training the next generation in renewable energy, digital technology, and sustainable development. Young Jamaicans from the South Coast wouldn't have to migrate to Kingston or overseas. They could study, innovate, and build careers without leaving their region. Then there's quality of life, something that gets lost in economic projections but matters enormously to actual human beings. This city could be designed from the ground up with livability in mind. Affordable housing integrated into the plan, not added as an afterthought. Public transportation that actually works, connecting neighborhoods efficiently. Green spaces woven throughout rather than squeezed in later. Cultural venues, markets, and community centers that give people places to gather, celebrate, and belong. It's the kind of city that urbanists dream about, but rarely get to build because most cities evolve chaotically over centuries. Black River has the rare opportunity to learn from everyone else's mistakes and do it right the first time. But let's be honest, big dreams crash hard when they collide with reality. And the reality facing Black River's transformation is complicated, expensive, and frankly, a bit terrifying. First, the money. Building a city isn't like constructing a neighborhood. It's building everything. Roads that can handle traffic for decades. Water systems that can supply tens of thousands of homes. Electrical grids robust enough for modern demands. Sewage treatment that doesn't become an environmental disaster. Schools, hospitals, police stations, fire departments. The price tag for all of this: billions of dollars, not millions, billions. Jamaica's national debt already sits at a significant percentage of its GDP. The government has made progress reducing it, but the country isn't exactly swimming in surplus cash. So where does the money come from? International loans come with conditions and interest. Foreign investment comes with expectations of returns. Public-private partnerships sound efficient until priorities conflict. Every funding source has strings attached, and those strings can strangle a project if pulled too tight. Then there's time, the enemy of all ambitious projects. Cities aren't built quickly. Even with unlimited money and perfect planning, constructing urban infrastructure takes years, often decades. During that time, governments change. A leader passionate about Black River today might be voted out tomorrow, replaced by someone who views the project as the previous administration's vanity. Bureaucracies slow everything down with regulations, approvals, and processes that exist for good reasons but feel maddening when you're trying to move fast. And public enthusiasm, high at announcement, can fade as years pass without visible results. Look at almost any mega project in history and you'll find the same pattern. Announced with fanfare, delayed by complications, scaled back due to budget overruns, and finally completed years late looking different from the original vision. Jamaica needs Black River to avoid that pattern, but the odds aren't encouraging. And then there's the most sensitive challenge of all: trust, or rather the lack of it. Jamaicans have watched development projects promise transformation before. They've seen land acquired, often from people who had little choice but to sell. They've watched construction benefit foreign companies more than local workers. They've seen completed projects cater to wealthy outsiders, while original residents face higher costs and displacement. St. Elizabeth residents looking at Black River's transformation have every right to ask hard questions. Who benefits from this city? Will my family afford to live here, or will rising property values price us out? Will the jobs go to locals or imported labor? Will this city reflect Jamaican culture or become a generic urban space that could exist anywhere? These aren't cynical questions. They're learned questions, born from watching promises break before. If Black River becomes a place where ordinary Jamaicans can't afford to live, work, or feel at home, then it doesn't matter how modern the infrastructure is. It will have failed the very people it's supposed to serve. Jamaica can learn from others who have tried this. The world has seen nations attempt to build cities from scratch, and the results offer valuable lessons, both inspiring and cautionary. Brazil built Brasília in the late 1950s, carving a new capital out of empty land in the country's interior. The vision was bold: create a modernist masterpiece that would symbolize Brazil's future and draw development away from the crowded coast. The result is visually stunning, a UNESCO World Heritage Site filled with architectural marvels designed by Oscar Niemeyer. But talk to people who live there, and you'll hear complicated feelings. Brasília can feel artificial, more monument than neighborhood. The grand design prioritized aesthetics over livability. Distances are vast, human scale often forgotten. It's a city that photographs beautifully, but doesn't always feel warm. Then there's Naypyidaw in Myanmar, a case study in what happens when ambition detaches from reality. The Myanmar government built an enormous new capital in the 2000s, spending billions on wide highways, massive government complexes, and infrastructure for 1 million people. There's just one problem. Barely anyone lives there. The highways are empty. The buildings echo with absence. Satellite images show a city that looks inhabited in renderings but ghostly in reality. Naypyidaw's failure teaches a brutal lesson. You can't command a city into existence. People choose where to live based on opportunity, community, and quality of life, not because a government declares it so. So what separates success from failure? Cities thrive when they offer something people actually want. Employment that pays well and provides dignity. Education that opens doors. Culture that reflects the people who live there. Community that makes you feel you belong. Infrastructure matters, but only as a foundation for human connection and opportunity. Black River needs to be designed for Jamaicans, by Jamaicans, with Jamaican priorities at the center. Anything less risks creating another expensive monument to ambition rather than a living, breathing city. But Black River isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a larger transformation sweeping across Jamaica, and understanding this context reveals just how high the stakes really are. Montego Bay is in the middle of its own dramatic change. A 33-story hotel tower is rising, set to become the tallest building in the entire Caribbean. Luxury resorts are expanding along the coastline. Investment is pouring in, but this growth raises questions. Who is it for? The tourists who visit for a week or the Jamaicans who live there year-round? As Montego Bay reaches upward and outward, will it remain a Jamaican city that welcomes tourists, or become a tourist city where Jamaicans work but don't truly belong? Black River could be the counterbalance, a city designed not for vacationers but for residents, a place where economic growth translates into middle-class stability rather than just service sector jobs. If Montego Bay represents Jamaica's tourism economy, and Kingston represents its political and commercial heart, then Black River could represent something equally vital: Jamaica's investment in its own people's future. Done right, these three cities form a triangle of balanced development. Kingston handles government and commerce. Montego Bay serves tourism and international hospitality. Black River focuses on education, innovation, logistics, and livability. Each city plays a role, and together they create an economy that doesn't depend too heavily on any single sector. Done wrong, Jamaica ends up with 3 cities competing for the same resources, replicating the same problems, and leaving the rest of the island still waiting for its turn. The stakes extend beyond Jamaica's shores. The entire Caribbean is watching because this touches on regional dynamics that have simmered for decades. The Cayman Islands dominate Caribbean finance, attracting banks and investment firms with favorable regulations. The Bahamas thrives on cruise tourism and offshore banking, positioning itself as the gateway for North American visitors. Barbados has recently rebranded as a digital nomad hub, offering visas for remote workers and marketing itself as the Caribbean's tech-forward destination. Each nation has found its niche, carved out its competitive advantage. But Jamaica is different. It's bigger, more populous, and culturally more influential than almost anywhere else in the region. Reggae, dancehall, Bob Marley, Usain Bolt, Jamaican cuisine, Jamaican slang. The island punches far above its weight in global culture. Yet economically, it has often struggled to convert that cultural power into infrastructure and prosperity. The potential has always been there, sitting just beneath the surface, waiting for the right catalyst. Black River could be that catalyst. A third city would give Jamaica the infrastructure backbone it's always lacked. Deep ports handling international cargo, industrial zones attracting manufacturing, tech campuses developing Caribbean solutions to Caribbean problems. If Jamaica can build a city that works, a city that demonstrates effective planning and execution, it shifts the entire region's perception. Jamaica stops being just the island with great music and fast runners. It becomes the Caribbean nation that delivers on big projects, that offers opportunity beyond tourism, that has room for people to grow. That shift has implications far beyond economics. It's about influence, about leadership, about showing other Caribbean nations what's possible when you think beyond the limits that have constrained the region for generations. For decades, Jamaica's development has been lopsided. Kingston grew into a sprawling metropolitan area that concentrates wealth, opportunity, and problems in one location. Montego Bay evolved into a tourism machine that generates revenue, but also creates dependency on an industry vulnerable to global economic shocks, pandemics, and climate change. Meanwhile, the rest of Jamaica, places like St. Elizabeth, Portland, Clarendon, and others waited for investment, waited for infrastructure, waited for their moment. Black River represents the possibility that the wait might finally be over. Not just for St. Elizabeth, but for the entire underdeveloped interior and coastline of Jamaica. If a third city succeeds, it proves that development doesn't have to concentrate in the same 2 places forever. It opens the door for other regions to imagine their own transformations. It creates a model that says, this is how you do it. This is how you spread prosperity instead of hoarding it. But models only work if they're executed properly. And execution is where vision meets the grinding reality of logistics, politics, and human nature. Jamaica needs investment, but not the kind that extracts wealth and leaves. It needs patient capital, investors willing to think in decades rather than quarters, partners who understand that building a city is building a society, and societies don't mature overnight. This means carefully structured deals that protect Jamaican interests, while still offering returns attractive enough to bring serious money to the table. It's a delicate balance, and getting it wrong could either scare investors away or sign away too much control. Jamaica also needs to avoid the corruption that has plagued major projects across the developing world. When billions of dollars flow through government contracts, the temptation to skim, to favor cronies, to inflate costs and pocket the difference. That temptation has destroyed more ambitious projects than lack of funding ever has. Transparency isn't just a nice ideal. It's the difference between a project that builds a city and one that builds fortunes for a few well-connected individuals while delivering broken promises to everyone else. Environmental sustainability can't be an afterthought either. Black River sits on a coastline that faces rising sea levels, stronger hurricanes, and warming ocean temperatures. Building a city that ignores climate reality is building a disaster in slow motion. This city needs to be resilient, designed with nature rather than against it. Renewable energy sources, water management systems that can handle both drought and flood, building codes that account for extreme weather. If Black River becomes a model for sustainable urban development in the Caribbean, its influence multiplies. And then there's culture, something harder to measure but impossible to ignore. Cities with soul attract people. Cities that feel sterile repel them. Black River needs to honor its history while embracing its future. That means preserving colonial architecture that tells the town's story, creating spaces for markets, festivals, and music, ensuring that Jamaican identity isn't just preserved but celebrated. A city where you can feel you're in Jamaica, not in some generic urban development that could be anywhere. The human element matters most. Families incent. Elizabeth right now are watching this unfold with mixed emotions. Hope that their children might find good jobs without leaving. Excitement that their region might finally receive the attention it deserves. But also anxiety. Anxiety that property taxes will rise beyond what they can pay. Anxiety that their neighborhood will be demolished for high rises. Anxiety that they'll become strangers in their own home, watching from the outside as others benefit from their displacement. These fears are legitimate, rooted in patterns seen worldwide. Gentrification isn't just an American or European problem. It happens anywhere development arrives faster than protections for existing residents. Jamaica has to get ahead of this. That means legal protections for long-term residents, affordable housing requirements that actually mean something, job training programs that prepare locals for the new opportunities rather than importing workers from elsewhere, community input that's genuine, not performative. If the people of St. Elizabeth feel ownership over Black River's transformation, if they see themselves in the city's future, then the project has a foundation stronger than any building. If they feel excluded, resentful, left behind, then no amount of modern infrastructure will create a thriving city. The timeline matters too, though it's hard to predict. Initial phases might focus on infrastructure, the unglamorous but essential work of laying pipes, paving roads, and building utility systems. Early wins could include upgraded transportation links connecting Black River to other parts of Jamaica, making it easier for goods and people to move. Incentives for businesses to establish operations there, creating employment before the city fully materializes. But expectations need to be managed. The first years might look messy, construction zones and bureaucratic delays, moments where critics question whether anything is actually happening. This is normal for projects of this scale. But in the age of social media where patience is scarce and criticism is instant, Jamaica's leaders will need to communicate clearly, celebrate small victories, and maintain momentum even when progress feels slow. Success won't arrive all at once. It will come in stages. The first businesses opening, the first families moving in, the first students graduating from new schools, the first generation of children who grow up thinking of Black River not as a quiet town but as a thriving city with opportunity. That generational shift, that change in perception, that's when you know the transformation is real. And if it works, if Black River succeeds in becoming a functional, prosperous, livable third city, the ripples extend far beyond Jamaica. Other Caribbean nations will study what Jamaica did, how they funded it, how they planned it, what worked and what didn't. Regional organizations might invest in similar projects elsewhere. The Caribbean could shift from a collection of economies dependent on tourism and offshore finance to a region with diversified, resilient economies capable of weathering global changes. But failure casts a long shadow too. If Black River stalls, if it becomes another half-finished project or a city that exists on paper but not in practice, It reinforces doubts. Doubts about Jamaica's ability to execute large-scale projects. Doubts about whether developing nations can build modern cities without compromising their identity or displacing their people. Those doubts make the next attempt harder, the next investor more skeptical, the next generation more cynical. So the stakes are clear. Jamaica isn't just building a city, it's testing a hypothesis. The hypothesis that small island nations can think big and deliver. That development can spread beyond traditional centers. That history's forgotten places can write new chapters. That vision, when combined with smart planning and genuine commitment, can transform reality. Black River's story is still being written. The blueprints are being drawn. The funding is being negotiated. The first decisions are being made that will echo for generations. And those decisions will determine whether this becomes one of the Caribbean's greatest success stories, or another cautionary tale about ambition exceeding execution. What's certain is that the world is watching. Investors are evaluating. Jamaicans are hoping. And Black River, that quiet coastal town with the extraordinary past, is standing at the threshold of a future that could be anything. The question isn't whether Jamaica can dream big. The island has always dreamed big. The question is whether this time, the dream becomes reality. Whether the lights that once made Black River shine across the Caribbean will shine again, brighter and for everyone. Whether a nation of 3 million people can build not just a city, but a symbol of what's possible when you refuse to accept limitations. Only time will tell. But the fact that Jamaica is trying, that it's willing to take this risk, to invest in its own future, to believe that Black River can rise again, that itself says something powerful about where this island is going. The story continues. The construction begins, and the future, uncertain but full of possibility, waits to be built.